This is Dr. Patrick Moore, the Chair and Chief Scientist of EcoSense Environmental in Vancouver, Canada. Dr. Moore is a co-founder and former chair of Green Spirit Strategies, an environmental consulting and communications firm in Vancouver, Canada. He received a Bachelor of Science in Forest Biology and a PhD in Ecology from the University of British Columbia in Canada. Welcome. Please proceed with your statement. You need to put on your microphone.
In 1971, as a PhD student in ecology, I joined an activist group in a church basement in Vancouver, Canada, and sailed on a small boat across the Pacific to protest U.S. hydrogen bomb testing in Alaska. We became Greenpeace. After 15 years in the top committee, I had to leave as Greenpeace began to adopt policies that I could not accept from my scientific perspective. Climate change wasn't really an issue when I abandoned Greenpeace, but it certainly is today. There is no scientific proof that human emissions of carbon dioxide are the dominant cause of the minor warming of the Earth's atmosphere over the past 100 years. If there were such a proof, it would be written down for all to see. No actual proof, as it is understood in science, exists. Please see Exhibit 1. The IPCC states, quote, "It is extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. Extremely likely is not a scientific term, rather a judgment as in a court of law. The IPCC defines extremely likely as a 95 to 100% probability. Those numbers are not the result of any mathematical calculation or statistical analysis. They have been invented to express the expert judgment as determined by the IPCC. As noted by many observers, including Dr. Freeman Dyson of the Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, a computer model is not a crystal ball. We may think it sophisticated, but we cannot predict the future with a computer model any more than we can make predictions with crystal balls, throwing bones, or by appealing to the gods. When modern life evolved over 500 million years ago, please see the second exhibit, CO2 was more than 10 times higher than today, yet life flourished at that time. Then an ice age occurred 450 million years ago when CO2 was still 10 times higher than today. The fact that there was both higher temperatures and an ice age at a time when CO2 was 10 times higher than today fundamentally contradicts the certainty CO2 emissions are the main cause of climate change. Today we remain locked in what is still the Pleistocene ice age, with an average global temperature of 4.5 degrees C. This compares with a low of about 12 degrees C during the periods of maximum glaciation in this ice age to an average of 22 degrees C during the greenhouse ages, which occurred over longer time periods prior to the most recent ice age. During the greenhouse ages, there was no ice on either pole, and all the land was tropical and subtropical. As recently as 3 million years ago, the Canadian Arctic islands were forested. Today, we live in an unusually cold period in the history of life. Note on the graph here, 14.5 degrees, and an unusually low period in carbon dioxide in the history of life, 400 ppm. There is ample reason to believe that a sharp cooling of the climate would bring disastrous results for human civilization, where there is no reason to believe that a warmer climate would be anything but beneficial for humans and the majority of other species. Please see Exhibit 3. The IPCC states that humans are the dominant cause of warming since the mid-20th century, which was 1950. From 1910 to 1940, there was an increase in global average temperature of ½ degree Celsius for that 30-year period. Then there was a 30-year pause until 1970. This was followed by an increase of 0.57 degrees C during the 30-year period from 1970 to 2000. Since then, there has been no increase. This in itself tends to negate the validity of the computer models, as CO2 emissions have continued to accelerate during this time. The increase in temperature between 1910 and 1940 was virtually identical to the increase between 1970 to 2000. Yet the IPCC does not attribute the 1910 to 40 increase to human influence. They are clear that human emissions impact only caused human emissions impact only increased the temperature since the mid-20th century. Why the IPCC believe that a virtually identical increase in temperature after 1950 is caused mainly by human influence when it has no explanation for the nearly identical increase from 1910 to 1940. It is important to recognize that humans are a tropical species. We evolved at the equator in a climate where freezing temperature did not exist. The only reasons we can survive these cold climates are fire, clothing, and housing. It could be said that frost and ice are the enemies of life, except for those relatively few species that have evolved to adapt to freezing temperature during the Ice Age. It is extremely likely that a warmer temperature than today's would be far better than a cooler one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. Thank you very much, Dr. Moore, and we now turn to our final witness.